are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are presented by staff or consultant. After the committee discusses the business items, the public is invited to formally comment. To start off with, could I get approval of the August 11th agenda?
Well, I don't think we have a quorum to be able to do that yet.
Rookie move, Joe. Okay. Well, then I'm going to move down the items. We've always had this expected actions of Freight Advisory Committee for 2021. Oh, there's Doug.
There's Doug. So I think you can, I'm sorry, Joe, I think you can start at the beginning with the approval of the agenda.
Could Mike Thrasher, could I get approval of the August 11th, 2021 meeting minutes?
Yeah, approved.
Motion approved. Close enough?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Item number 5 is expected actions of the Freight Advisory Committee for 2021. We're just, this is the fourth quarter meeting, so there aren't really going to be any more actions from this committee. The only thing kind of on any action we might take is if we still really feel strongly after going over the tip criteria, whether or not that we want to put together a letter stating our thoughts on the tip criteria. Other than that, I don't see any other actions of this Freight Advisory Committee for 2021.
Joe?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt again. So you skipped the minutes.
I heard a second and a.
That was for the approval of the agenda.
Okay.
I think Joe's actually correct. They did move. This is Craig. They did move and second the minutes, but we didn't move the agenda, just to make sure. I think we.
Oh, okay. I heard it backwards then. Sorry.
All right. Well, can I get a motion for approval of today's agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
I'll second it.
All right. We are doing a great job playing office today, guys. So on the expect actions of the Freight Advisory Committee, we'll have some internal conversations after the staff present the CHIP criteria and after we learn a little bit more about the long-range transportation plans. So moving further down the agenda down to informational reports, item A is discussion of urban freight corridors as part of Alaska's long-range transportation plan. I think everybody here has been attending the statewide long-range transportation plan meetings. The proposed critical urban freight corridors. Does anybody, Brian, do you have a slide that you could pull up of that? Otherwise, I could share my screen and I could share it from my end.
Yeah, Joe, I had a presentation I was going to share on the screen.
Oh, yeah, hop on it then. Thank you, Brian.
Okay. Okay, can you see it, Joe?
We've got a black screen right now.
Not yet. Yep. There it is. Now I see it.
We have visual. We've got a visual up front here.
We see the Port of Alaska.
All right, very good. I love that shot. So I'll just kick this off here. I know we have a couple minutes to devote to this topic, but good afternoon, everyone. My name's Brian Funkhauser with Michael Baker, and we've been working with Kittleson and the DOT on the update of the state's long-range transportation plan as well as the freight plan. And as Joe indicated, we've got a number of things that we wanted to get you caught up on and get any review comments from you on a number of items that are going to be of benefit not only to the Anchorage metro area, but also for inclusion within the updated statewide freight plan. So just by way of background, we're about midway through the update of the long-range plan and the freight plan. Our team has been working with the DOT and developing a summary of existing conditions as it relates to transportation statewide, as well as freight planning statewide. So we have completed and submitted those tech memorandums earlier this year and have reviewed those documents with the state's Freight Advisory Committee. At this point in the development of the plan, we have been working with the Freight Advisory Committee on recommendations to a priority freight transportation system or priority freight network, both on the federal side as well as the state side. And I'll be talking to those points in more detail as part of this briefing. We're looking at updating the state's federal system designations. Some of you may be familiar with work that the state had done in recent years with the passage of MAP 21 and then the FAST Act, the provision that those acts provided for the states in identifying a priority freight network or roadways that would be eligible for funding through the National Highway Freight Program. In Alaska's case, that's roughly $19 million a year in additional federal dollars that are available to fund freight-related projects on the system. So that is admittedly a drop in the bucket, but it is still welcome added business. And the state has an opportunity to designate certain roadway segments and roadway corridors that would be eligible for this new federal freight funding. The overall network is organized into a series of subsystems. There's one layer of the system is known as the primary highway freight system. And this is primarily the interstates in Alaska, kind of longer range, higher speeds on these roadways. And then another subsystem is a collection of roadways known as critical urban and critical rural freight corridors. And that's really going to be one of the focuses of this afternoon's presentation, is looking at the opportunities that we have, particularly within the Anchorage metropolitan area, for additional designation of roadway segments that could be certified by the federal government as a critical urban freight corridor. So we're going to be looking at that. We're also going to be looking at the statewide multimodal freight network, and we're looking at making some updates and upgrades on that network as well. We're also working closely with the state's Freight Advisory Committee on updating the freight plan action strategies, or what are the specific things that we need to be doing in order to improve the safe and efficient movement of freight in Alaska statewide. So again, beginning with this federally designated freight system, again, I mentioned that this is another federal source of funding, of federal funding that would be available to Alaska to the tune of $19 million a year. And looking at the listing of existing urban freight corridors that have been identified. And when we talk about these critical urban freight corridors, we're looking at, I would characterize them as first and last mile connectors. These are roadways that connect our major shippers and receivers to our major freight roadways. These are roadways of state significance for Alaska's freight transportation. Every state in the nation has been given an allowance of mileage for this network. In Alaska's case, it's around 122 miles that the state has been allocated. 122 miles. And you can see from the table on the screen here that the state has only designated fewer than 15 miles have been designated and certified by FHWA, and they're all in the Fairbanks urbanized area. So again, I'll just repeat, Anchorage has an opportunity to add additional mileage to this priority state freight network. On the rural side, you see the urban freight corridors up top, and then on the bottom of this table, we see the critical rural freight corridors. All of that mileage is consumed by the Dalton Highway, 235 miles have been designated as a critical rural freight corridor. So again, I'm really here as a representative of the state's Freight Advisory Committee. And as that committee wrestles with some of these decisions, we are looking to this group, this committee, for any input or suggestions to get some additional roadway segments designated and eventually certified as urban freight corridors. And in doing so, these roadway segments would then be eligible for federal freight system funding. Through some of the discussions that we've had with the State Freight Advisory Committee, we've identified roadways as candidates for these critical urban freight corridors. This is just a bulletized list here. And I'll give you a few moments to read over the list. But these are roadways that have been identified by the MPO previously, so there shouldn't be any surprises here with regard to this list of candidates. Just move on then to showing these roadways in tabular format. Most of the additional urban freight corridors that have been proposed are in the greater Anchorage area. There are others outside of Anchorage, up in Wasilla. And some of these, like the designation of Trunk Road and Palmer-Wasilla Road, are going to be dependent on whether or not Mat-Su is ultimately designated as an MPO. I'll show this in another way with some mapping. You can see from the map here, the roadways that are shown in light gray are already on the federal system. These are what I referenced earlier as primary highway freight system routes, or the PHFS routes. So you see the Seward Highway here, the connector into the Ted Stevens International Airport, and others here into the Port of Alaska. There are new roadways that are proposed for addition here, and they show up here on this map. So we're looking at the extension of International Airport Road over to Old Seward, Northern Lights Boulevard, Post Road, Ocean Dock Road, and Raspberry Road.
Let me mute it.
So I'm just going to pause here for a moment. I've been doing a lot of presenting, but I'll just pause right here and just open up the floor to if anyone had any comments or initial reactions to some of these proposals. Any initial reactions?
I think it's excellent. I think that there's a couple more access points on down by the port where when you get up to 3rd Avenue or 4th Avenue, that might need to be included, but I don't think it'd be more than a mile or two. After the meeting, would you get me the list? It looks like the list has grown slightly since the original proposed critical urban freight corridors. And with that list, I'll circulate it around some of my trucking professionals to make sure that we're not missing something.
Yeah, I think I saw Eric is on the call here. Maybe I can just, Eric, I'll forward the PowerPoint presentation to you for distribution, if that works.
Yeah, that works.
Oops. And again, I'll just emphasize that the state is way under, it's well under our mileage cap of 122 miles. So there's really no concern about any limitations there with regard to that.
If I think it would, we of course need to leave room for growth and, thanks to Fairbanks for not hogging all the miles to begin with. So I didn't want to pay it forward by not taking all 122 miles that are left. But wouldn't it be advisable just to make more of our roads available for this extra, separate pot of money? Where we bump this thing up to, 85 miles of critical urban roads?
I mean, again, under the provisions of the FAST Act, again, the state has that allowance of up to 122 miles. So as part of the statewide freight plan update, we just wanted to surface this as an issue with the Anchorage MPO as an opportunity for you to kind of take a fresh look at what are those critical first and last mile connectors, and working with the DOT to get those considered for designation and then eventual certification by FHWA. I will say too that as part of the freight plan update, that the state is going to be revisiting these priority networks on a recurring basis. The current law says that the states need to update these freight plans every 5 years. And I think from some of the initial information I'm seeing from the reauthorization, that cycle may be shortened to every 4 years. So the DOT will be continuing to monitor the composition of this network, but I will add that changes and edits to this priority network can be made on the fly, as it were. So we don't need to wait for those 4 or 5 year plan update cycles to make modifications to these priority networks.
So members of the Anchorage Freight Advisory Committee, when we get a copy of these proposed roads, please cycle them around, knowledgeable folks in your companies and in your organizations. And maybe we could put forth a letter to help the engineering team with guidance on what would be extra roads that should be included in it. And yeah, it just seems like at this first initial glance, we could definitely find another 20 miles without being silly. I bet there's a guaranteed good 20 miles once I circulate around my board. That's all I have to say about that. Any comments from the committee? All right, let's keep moving.
All right. I will say, Joe, that the upcoming meetings of the state's Freight Advisory Committee are going to be focusing on freight plan actions as well as scenario planning. So I'll coordinate with Eric on the side in terms of any kind of deadlines or there's no near-term deadline for this, but we would appreciate any feedback that you or your group there has on this list so we can make sure it finds its way into the state freight plan. Okay. From here, I mean, these are our federally designated routes, and we also wanted to give you an overview of some of the state priority freight corridors as they relate to the statewide multimodal freight network. And I just want to draw a distinction here. These are very different from what we just looked at on the federal side. There's no federal strings attached to this particular designation, but this is a system that the state has developed, a system that the state is using and maintaining as a planning tool for really helping to prioritize projects for the STIP. And just to give you a visual, some of you may remember or recognize this graphic, but this was taken from the freight plan from 2016. And that identified a statewide multimodal freight network, which included major facilities, corridors, and connectors that have been deemed as critical to supporting the state's economy. So it includes not only roadways, but it also includes the railroad, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, the marine highways, seaports, and airports. So again, this is carrying forward from the previous statewide freight plan. Our team has been looking at making modifications to this priority network, and I'll just show those here on the screen. And this is all based on feedback that we've received from the State Freight Advisory Committee and some of our stakeholder interviews that we've done throughout the past year. But the freight plan update is going to be looking at proposing these additions to the state's priority freight network. So from the table, you can see that we're proposing adding routes in the southeast, like the Haines Highway and the Klondike Highway, as well as the Port of Haines itself. We're also looking at adding roadway routes connecting the Port of Nenana to the Parks Highway, as well as the port itself. You see the Whittier Tunnel on there, as well as the Palmer-Wasilla Highway. And we're also proposing adding the Port of Clarence, which has been a key strategic northern deepwater port of refuge.
Hey, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Yes, this is Steve Rebuffo. Before you go any further, could you go back to the Alaska map slide? Yeah, I'm looking at the blue routing that is called the Alaska Marine Highway. And, we were in a strategic planning, some of us were in a strategic planning session a week or so ago, and got into this conversation about there's an Alaska Marine Highway that the Maritime Administration is defining, and then there's the states, which is really the ferry system. And this has got a blue line that comes all the way up to Anchorage, and we don't see ferries up in Anchorage and into Cook Inlet. So is the definition of Alaska Marine Highway different than the ferries, or is the graphic incorrect? I don't know I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, Steve, that's a great point. This is Mark Lucan. I guess the one thing I would highlight is this is a state, multimodal freight network. So I think it's identified by the state. So, it kind of looks like they're mixing apples and oranges, right? Because they've got the Marine Highway that does come up to the Port of Anchorage, but yet if you look at this in more detail, it also really kind of reflects the MHS routes as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's the we're challenged enough as it is to understand from a Port of Alaska point of view, to understand when there's money available, where can we go for it? And there is a Maritime Administration definition of a marine highway system for Alaska, and we're eligible for that. But when you talk about the marine highway system in the state of Alaska, we're not. And there ought to be some way to clear up that miscommunication.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, though, for the purposes of this graphic and for the purposes of this priority freight network, that this would be indicative of the state saying, these are the corridors, these are the facilities or the assets that are most important to us from a freight movement standpoint. But we are in the process of updating this graphic, and if there's any clarification that needs to be made there, we will investigate that and provide that clarification as part of the plan update.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Joe, that concludes what I had here for this afternoon, unless anyone had any questions or comments.
Are there any comments from the committee or anybody else who's just in the meeting? Is there any members of the public that I think are in a different waiting room that might want to comment on this? Brian, thank you very much for your time.
All
And
right, we look forward to your feedback.
we'll get you some roads, rest assured.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for including us today.
But moving forward, I'd ask for an update on the TIP criteria. Will that be Mr. Lyons or will that be, who'd be?
This is Craig. I will see what I can do to fill in some blanks here. Aaron is on the line as well, and we've been working together on this, but I'll start and see where we get. So we put those out for a 2-month public comment period. That closed September 20th. We got about 140 public comments. They're broken down into the different categories that the criteria are, which are safety, mobility, preservation of the system, or preservation of the existing system, I guess, economic and environment. Those are the main categories. And so we probably got, I think a quarter of those, maybe well, a little under a quarter. Safety were related to safety. About 20% were kind of related to mobility, and about the same for the environment, and then down from there. So, the idea is where staff is adjudicating those comments to provide answers to them, and then take them before the technical and policy committees next month, so that we can get ready to do a call for nominations. I can't remember if we ever went through these in any format with you. I thought we came before you with some version of the truth a couple months ago, but refresh my memory on that. I'm happy to go through them now if you want. Depends on what the committee wants me to do.
We did see the criteria a few months back. There was debating on whether the Freight Advisory Committee wanted to write a letter or not. In looking at it, I'm sure the policy committee and the technical committee will, you've got enough of your hands full at that. So is there any member of the committee that, doesn't have the AMAT's proposed TIP criteria that they'd want in, an extra copy of?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, basically what we're planning on doing is the main thing is when they go out for call for nominations, that's the opportunity. What we do as staff is we look at the projects that are in the short term, the first 10 years of our long range plan, the MTP, and then we try to look at plans that may have passed since the last TIP, which was 4 years ago, and then we look at any projects that have been nominated by the public, by agencies, etc., and then rank those. So it is, it's an opportunity for the Freight Committee to look at possible projects for nomination, to get them included there, whether those are projects that we already have listed in the MTP, or projects that you guys know about that we may not be aware of that are, something that's a good priority for us. So and again, we're hoping to get the criteria approved in the next little bit so we can do that call for nominations. We need to have this approved by about August of next year. The new TIP, that is, the new funding plan.
By no means do I expect you to, know this answer off the top of your head, but what are the top 2 freight projects in Anchorage right now that you guys, are looking at, or, have been in the works for a while?
Well, we've got some projects that are underway right now. We had that C Street Ocean Dock Road ramp and intersection improvements. I think we're kind of, that was started, but I don't know how. I think they're trying to roll it into something else right now, the state that is. We've got the Seward to Glen planning and environmental linkages study that's looking. We expanded the, I guess they call it the study area, I think is the proper engineering term for it, but we expanded that to go to look over at the Port of Alaska as well. So it's not just looking at possible connections between Seward and Glen, but it's also looking at how do those two corridors connect into the port. So, other than those two, I think the usual ones are the connection, the stuff over there by Whitney and Ocean Dock Road and all that sort of stuff. I may have to look in the MTP to see which project might be in there, but is not quite bubbled up onto the tip yet. But I can do that and share those through John and get you a potential list and see if there's something in there that you folks want to nominate.
Yeah, it's just function of seeing if, with the new tip criteria versus old criteria, does it kind of move it up or down on Anchorage's priority list? But I'll just take a little bit of studying, and I'll definitely do the legwork, help you with the legwork, Craig. I don't want you to have to do all that stuff. I'm not one to assign homework.
No, I'm fine. I mean, that's kind of what we're here for. We're here to help you guys out to make sure that AMATS is paying attention to the freight industry as well. It's part of our job.
All right. Is there any comments? Am I in error in thinking that there's public in this? I'll just ask, are there any comments from anybody on the committee or any from the public? All right. Moving to part C of the informational reports. Update on 2050 MTP. Who wants to field that one?
I'm looking for his name to go off being on mute. Aaron Yonganalen is here. He's our senior planner who's managing that update. So there he is.
Hello, everyone. I'm the project manager for the 2050 MTP. I'm Aaron Yonganalen. I just wanted to stop by really quickly and give you an update on where we're at with the plan. So the 2050 MTP is a long-range transportation plan update that AMATS is doing. This plan is looking 20 plus years out. What are our transportation needs and what kind of projects, policies, or actions can we do to help address those needs? So we look at all modes. And right now we are developing our goals and objectives for that plan. So I did want to share my screen really quickly. Make sure I get this to work. Can you guys see my screen with the PDF up on it?
Yep.
Okay. So this screen right here is just kind of quickly showing you, and we sent out this information to all the committees, so it's nothing new. I'm just kind of re-showing it and kind of walking through it. So the first part is talking about what's happening right now. So we have the goals and objectives on the policy committee agenda for next Thursday for them to review. We're asking them to release it for a 30-day public comment period. And so you can find that on AMATS's amats2050.com website, which is our MTP website. You can also find a committee recording where I go through each of the goals and objectives if you want to ask, find out more about what's changed from the previous MTP. We made some pretty significant changes, so I recommend you kind of watch through that or read through it. And if the policy committee releases them for a 30-day public comment period, we're anticipating that comment period to be during December. And at the same time, we'll also be having a survey out. So it gives people more options of how they can participate and provide their comments to us. After that's done, then we're going to kind of move forward to the next portion in January, February timeframe, which is working on the performance measures and targets and then project criteria. And so we hopefully will have those available for a 30-day public comment period in March. So it's just kind of heads up on stuff that's coming up for this plan. We're trying to get the word out to as many committees as possible and groups as possible to let them know to start looking at the goals and objectives now, because they are available for you to look at, even though they're in a draft format, in case you want to meet sometime in December to get comments back to us as a committee. And that's all I had. So if you had any questions, just let me know.
Are there any comments or questions from any member of the public or any member of the committee? Thank you very much for your time, Aaron.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
You too.
Are there
Hey, Joe?
any? Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm sorry. This is Brian Funkhauser again. I I did have a question with regard to any priority projects that would be identified as part of the MPO's freight plan, what the timetable would be for identifying those for potential inclusion in the state freight plan.
It looks like I've got some work to do. I'll have it ready for when the next freight plan is next week or first week in December. When's the next statewide freight plan?
Oh, we do have a meeting on December 1st with the State Freight Advisory Committee, but yeah, we are interested in any project priorities from the MPO region to include in the state freight plan.
All right, looks like I got some homework to do.
All right, thank you, Joe.
All right, next on the agenda is committee comments. Does anybody on the committee have anything to kind of add to this? And John, when would our next meeting be? It would be first quarter, so we won't meet till after the end of the year?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so your first quarter 2022 meeting would be in February. I don't have the exact date identified right yet, but it's like the second week in February 2022.
All right, in which case, after we kind of leaf through some of the projects and Craig can point me in the right direction, it is, I'll make sure and keep members of the committee kind of on the email chain as we identify some projects, because the statewide freight plan, the overall plan will be more of a policy document, but the freight plan document can actually recommend projects. So I think it would behoove us to, kind of bang our heads against it a little bit and find some projects that are here in the Anchorage Bowl that we would like to include in that statewide plan. So that's, I guess, a little bit of homework that we got to do before the end of the month. So I'll make sure and CC everybody on stuff that we find. We're just gonna have to have kind of informal conversations, be talking to each other, because I don't want to miss the boat on that. So are they taking up at the policy committee? Are they going to be reviewing the tip criteria on that November 18th meeting?
No, we're still chewing on the comments. 140, we got to come up with decent answers to these folks. So we're about halfway through to get these finalized. So, and they have to go through the technical committee first. So,
were any of them less than constructive, Craig? Do you have any highlights you want to share?
Trying to get me in trouble, sir?
All right.
They're all over the place in all sorts of different areas, and all sorts of folks trying to make Anchorage a better place to, as they say, live, work, and play.
That's a statesman type answer right there, Craig.
Years in the legislature, my friend.
All right, with I'll just take one more minute to see if anybody has any other comments or anything to add. Otherwise, let's get out of here under 45 minutes. With that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, and there'll be some informal talks, but our next scheduled meeting will be sometime in February 2022. And
Thank you, sir.
Feel free to, if anybody wants to take the chair, when are we going to knock me out of the chairmanship, and if somebody else wants to stand the reins of this thing?
Mr. Chair, I believe that would be at your first meeting in 2022.
All right, sounds good. Hope everybody has a good afternoon.
Thanks, Joe. Bye.
Thanks. Appreciate it.